This is the In Focus podcast from The Hindu.
Hello and welcome to the Hindus in Focus podcast. I am Nivedita Varadarajan. The Indian government fixes a minimum support price or an MSP for 22 crops. Paddy, wheat, several pulses, oilseeds, and millets are a part of this list. The objective for declaring the MSP is to help farmers get a good price for their produce and to procure food grains for public distribution. However, recent data shows that the cost of production is rising. A recent report by Infomerics Rating notes that the value of the minimum support price for paddy has increased over time, reflecting the rising overall cost of production. It also notes that the input costs have risen drastically. It also notes that there is a significant disparity among states when it comes to both production and procurement. This has a big impact on farmers' incomes. There is also a steady demand for a legally binding MSP. In fact, on the 17th of December, the Standing Committee of Agriculture, Animal Husbandry and Food Processing, in its report on the demand for grants for 2024-25 of the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, noted that the implementation of MSP is a focal point in the dialogue surrounding agricultural reforms and farmer welfare in the country. It goes on to say, and I quote, since the committee believed that implementing a robust and a legally binding MSP in the country could play a crucial role in reducing farmer suicides in India by providing financial stability, protecting against market volatility, and alleviating debt burdens, they recommend the implementation of the same. Unquote. I recently spoke to Dr. Manoranjan Sharma, Chief Economist at Infomerics Ratings, about rice production in the country, how MSP is calculated, and the health of the rural economy. Hello and welcome to the InFocus podcast, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Pleasure to be with the Hindu group once again.
Sir, there is a lot of rice. India makes a lot of rice and India procures a lot of rice. The Indian government procures a lot of rice and we export a lot of it too. How much rice is India actually producing?
If as you rightly say, over the years there has been a significant increase in rice production in the country. The most authoritative source for this kind of data in India is what we call the Department of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare (DANFW). So the latest report that we have is for September 2024. So if you look at this September 2024 report, production stood at 135.76 million tons in FY23, and this is expected to reach 137 million tons of rice in FY24. Further, Kharif rice production is expected to be 119.9 million tons for FY25 compared to 113.2 million tons in FY24. Now, let me try to place things in a proper historical and comparative perspective. If you look at when India was largely an agriculture economy, when we gained independence in 1950, the total food grains production in the country was only 50.8 million tons. For 2024, we reached a level of 328.9 million tons, which is a significant, remarkable achievement by any standards.
So India is one of the top three rice producing countries, but unlike China, which is another top producing country, we also export a lot of rice. What explains this dynamic?
Which dynamics?
Like China doesn't, they use most of their rice for their own domestic consumption. Is there a difference in how rice pattern? Is there a difference in rice producing pattern in both India and China? China obviously does very well when it comes to production. Their yields are much higher than us. Can you explain the difference between the two?
Yeah, China had some kind of a first mover advantage. You'll recall that traditionally we did very poorly, both in terms of agriculture, production, and productivity. The 1960s, late 1960s, 67, 69, we had the what is known technically as the HYV revolution, popularly known as the Green Revolution, focused on three, four critical elements such as high yielding seeds, variety of seeds, manure, fertilizers, and irrigation. There were some other agro practices, welcome agro practices, dissemination of crucial information to farmers, connectivity with markets. So, all these factors individually and collectively gave some kind of an incentive. So, obviously, there has been significant increase over the years, particularly in the post Green Revolution phase, but we still have a lot of catching up to do with China.
So within India, there's a lot of difference between the states which produce their rice. Your report also focused on that. What is the difference between, say, a Punjab and a West Bengal when it comes to producing rice, and how does the procurement also of it affect the farmers?
Okay, before I come to a specific query, I'd like to highlight one thing that if you look at the geography of India, what you find is that Eastern India, when I say Eastern India, I mean states like West Bengal, Bihar, Odisha, and eastern part of UP. These three and a half states comprise Eastern India. So they are primarily rice growing, rice eating variety. But historically, these states have been laggard both in terms of production and productivity, and this has been a long-standing concern in Indian economy, in agriculture economics in particular, also a concern of the central bank. In about 40 years back, I think it was in 84 or 85 that the RBI appointed a high level committee called which was set up to examine the issue of production and productivity in the eastern India. I don't remember the chairman of this committee, but the member secretary was a director, became an advisor later in the Reserve Bank of India, Mr. K.R. Holla. So, under this committee, they made several wide ranging recommendations. Some of these have been implemented, but still, now the entire beneficial results have still not come, and we find significant variation, as you rightly highlighted, across the states. If you look at the CSTP data, then you find that in case of Punjab, 21% of total procurement, Telangana 14.7, Chhattisgarh 9.6, Odisha 8.9, Andhra Pradesh 7.4, and Haryana 6.6%. These are the major states from which central government procurement takes place. If you look in terms of paddy production, then West Bengal 12.5% of total production, Uttar Pradesh 12%, Punjab 9.9% are the major paddy producing states in India. Now, another metric, another benchmark of looking at things could be the ratio of state procurement to state production. So, when you look at things in terms of this parameter, you find that in Punjab it's at a whopping level of 99%, Haryana 81.81%, Chhattisgarh 67.2%, and Telangana 66.9%. So these states, state procurement takes place on a large level. But if you look at the macro picture, all over India, 18% farmers have benefited from procurement operations across India. But in states such as Punjab, 99%, Telangana, 86%, have benefited from paddy operations. Now, what I wish to submit is that a higher procurement to production ratio implies that the center government acts as an assured buyer of state rice production, providing production, market, and income security to farmers. Because I think we studied long back that agriculture in India was traditionally considered to be something like a gamble in monsoon, particularly production of rice. Now, obviously, things have improved. We have come a far way with high yielding variety of seeds, but still, the monsoon effect is a significant factor in Indian agriculture in general and rice production in particular. So, this kind of ironing out the volatility, the fluctuations by this measure of procurement is helpful.
So, how does this help the farmer? So, is it safe to say that a farmer in a place who's in, say, a Punjab or a Haryana, where there's a lot more government procurement, their income is more safe than a farmer in in a state where procurement levels aren't that high?
Two, three things I'd like to flag here. One is that, as I said, I gave you some, shared some data with you that in states such as Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, this kind of procurement levels are much higher. They are concentrated in these kind of crops, which this gives them a ready return MSP, which is usually well above the market price. But then this is significant long term debilitating implications. If you go through the last few years, there have been a large number of very, for want of a better word, I may say scary reports, which suggest that we grow a large number of crops in India, but two crops, two major agriculture, rice particularly, and to a certain extent sugarcane, they are known as water guzzlers, use a lot of water. And Punjab is still, despite all the persuasion, continue to grow paddy on a very large scale, and with the result that the water table has dropped very drastically. So, if those scary projections hold out, there are some concerns that maybe a few years down the line, maybe 10, 15 years, the once most fertile land in this part of the country, in India, could turn to be something like a desert. And this process of desertification is already on, in the sense that water table in most parts of Punjab has dropped very significantly, and there is a need to look at aspects such as crop rotation, aspects such as moving over to other agriculture produce which may not require so much water, but will provide income and security to the farmer. So all these are broader questions which need to be looked at carefully.
So, can we say safely that there is a difference between a farmer in Haryana, Punjab, and places where there are higher procurement in their income level compared to farmers in states where the procurement level is not that high? Is it a safe bet to say? So, in that case, how is farmers' incomes and different across India?
Farmers income would be different. It would be farmers income are basically a function of a variety of factors: the kind of crops they grow, the kind of marketing facilities, the kind of elaborate network of rural financial institutions like commercial banks, cooperative bank system, which is a three-tier system comprising of a state cooperative bank at the apex level. Then at the intermediary level, we have DCCBs, district central cooperative banks. At the lowest end of the this three-tier, we have something called PACs, primary agriculture trade societies, or in some predominantly tribal areas, we have an institution called LAMPS, large size Adivasi multi-purpose society, a particular preference of persons for particular kind of foods. So all this is a very complex issue, and there are several forces and factors which explain why a particular crop is grown. Obviously, the income criteria. The farmer has also to run his family. So obviously, if a crop gives him higher returns, obviously the farmer would be naturally attracted to this kind of a crop. But there are other agroclimatic features, the condition of the soil, the availability of irrigation facilities, connectivity to markets. So all these forces and factors need to be looked at in a holistic perspective for a comprehensive assessment and perspective.
So, one of the factors that deals with income is the cost of production. If the cost of production is very high, the farmers will not get the returns that they deserve. Your report points out that the cost of production has risen a lot. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, yes, but before I come to this, there has been one issue which is inextricably linked with the rice production, with MSP. So there are issues of A2 plus FL. So let me take a minute to explain. Now, here the agriculture prices in India for the last several years, several decades, in fact, are determined largely by the recommendations of Agriculture Cost and Prices (CACP). Now, this CACP factors aspects such as cultivation cost, supply and demand situation, market price trends, both domestic and global, and the impact on consumers and the environment. So, this is the broad framework of CACP, Commission for Agriculture Cost and Prices. Now we come to the slightly tricky part, the part which is quite controversial. There are basically three kinds of costs discussed by CACP. Also, they were highlighted in the long drawn farmers' struggle when they came close to Delhi for a long time, had a lot of demonstrations. So basically, when we speak of these kind of production costs, there are three kind of production costs can be clearly distinguished. The first is what we know as A2 cost. When you say A2, it primarily covers direct costs incurred by farmers, including expense on seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, labor, and some other aspects. Now, the second aspect, the second way of looking at this cost is what is called A2 plus FL. So, here A2 is the same as what we discussed earlier, but FL includes family labor, A2 costs, and the value of unpaid family labor. The farmer or his family member, his wife and children may be working on the farm. So, there is some kind of an imputed cost attributed to it. So, for a realistic assessment, if the farmer were not to work on the farm or his wife and children do not work, so he would have to use some hired labor. So, that also you have to make some provision. So, this is considered to be quite reasonable, and this is usually the price, this is usually the cost we consider in all serious discussion. Now, beyond these two, here we have one more cost consideration, which is popularly known as C2. Now, C2 is the most comprehensive cost. It also considers rentals and foregone interest on owned land and capital assets on top of A2 plus FL. Now, when you look at the MSP calculations, they are normally recommended at 1.5 times, 1.5x of the A2 plus FL cost of production, which is the intermediate level of this kind of an index. MSP of rupees 2,300 per quintal has kept up with the cost of production of rupees 53 per quintal in FY 24 25. Input costs have increased by 6.1% over the last 1 year. The increase is largely driven by increase in human labor cost. This is increasingly become an important issue, not in Punjab, Haryana, in most parts of the country, that availability of labor for this kind of a labor intensive operation, this is causing serious problem, and there has been a steep rise in these kind of costs. Now, if you look at the present situation, they constitute 50% of total input costs and have risen over the last 1 year by about 6%. So, going forward, there are some very good agricultural practices in Israel, in some other countries, where there is a sharper focus on mechanization, on using more measures which can, to a certain extent, substitute human labor by mechanized efforts. So we have to increasingly look at these aspects also, apart from crop rotation, apart from growing crops in conformity with the agroclimate conditions of the country, rather than just being doing more of the same. But doing more of the same has disastrous implications, not just for the rice growing regions for the country, but also for the larger macroeconomy and India as a whole.
So, before we come to the MSP aspect of this, I just wanted to ask you about mechanization. Can mechanization be done in India, given that the size of our farms are really small?
Yes, that is a very significant bottleneck because size of farms in India are very small. That's correct. And if you look at the data put out in public domain by the Department of Agriculture, Ministry of Agriculture, the apex institution in this field, which is NABARD, National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development, maybe some difference, 1-2%. So without nitpicking, without drawing some kind of a line there, roughly by most indicators, 85% of farmers in India belong to what we call the SF and MF group, small farmers or marginal farmers. So obviously, all these issues of mechanized farming have limited relevance. So, but then wherever there is a will, there is a way. We can all these could be corporatized in certain ways by pooling all these farms together. They could have a share in income, they could have a share in profits, whatever mechanism. So some of these experiments have been tried in varying measures, with great success in some countries and to a limited extent, much more limited extent in India. I see no reason why such measures could not be adopted, which will give a significant boost to agriculture production, productivity, structural transformation of Indian agriculture, and also give a boost to farmers' income, have a good impact on the distributive equity, social justice. So all these need to be considered in a broader framework rather than looking at things from a narrow prism.
So as you said, MSP has not kept up with the cost of production. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
So if that's a huge concern, right? What is the government doing to address this? Some states are giving a bonus on top of MSP to tie the gap, but isn't it time to revise the MSP then?
Again, this is a very complex issue because you see, the state, when you pay the MSP to the exchange, there are several complex issues. Let me try to flag. One thing is that when you're giving MSP, then you are distorting the market mechanism, you are interfering with the forces of demand and supply. So then there are so many other issues. Why restricted to paddy or wheat? Why not go to other crops? So this is one set of issues. And the set of issues, this is highly skewed in geographical terms. As I said, largely confined to northwest part of the country or North India. The south has not benefited, so is their traditional issue. And the third most important aspect is that money does not grow on trees. The government of India, they are focused on, and rightly so, on fiscal deficit. You will recall that last 2020 were terribly bad years. We had a COVID-19 pandemic, which constituted something like a medical come emergency, the worst we had seen in last 100 years. The nearest comparisons which come to mind are the Spanish flu of 1919, COVID-19 debilitated income, output, and employment, and devastated lives and livelihoods on large scale. So the government of India now, hopefully, now things are gaining traction. The Indian economy is on a steady growth path. We have emerged as a bright spot in the global economy. If you look at India's position, consistently achieving now post-pandemic. These 2 years were an aberration, 2020 and 2021. So we have been achieving a growth, steady growth in the sense of 6.5 to 7.58%. and this makes us some kind of an outlier, an outperformer on the global level when the global economy is growing at 3.2% this year, next year also. And among the large economies, India is the fastest growing. Last year it had a growth rate of almost double of what is known as the group known as in which EMEs, emerging market economies. So, but then if you have to restrict the fiscal deficit, the government is a competing claims. You have to provide for rural infrastructure, you have to give a push to infrastructure, you have to look after health facilities, education, administration, law and order. So all these claims have to be reconciled and harmonized. So looking at things only for the from the prism, as sometimes there is a tendency in some geographies, some small geographies such as Punjab, Haryana, that I think may not be a correct way of appropriate way of looking at things. We have to look at things in a broader macro perspective, and when you do so, you will find that the government of India they have their limitations. They are severely constrained because they have so many other aspects to also effectively handle.
So, what can be the returns to the farmer as of now? So, if the cost of production is more than the amount they're selling it for, there will not be enough money for them to function. After all, agriculture is an economic activity even for the farmers. Even though they get a lot of subsidies, they still need money to, survive. What's the solution for them?
Okay, so before solution, I'll just like to highlight that there's a large variation in the cost of production, something sometimes also referred to in the literature on agriculture development in general and rice production in particular as COP, cost of production. So state specific COP can be either above or below the A2 plus FL recommended at the national level. Now, in some cases, what we suggest is that bonus may be recommended by the state governments to cover the difference between the state specific COP and the nationally recommended A2 plus FL or support income security to marginal farmers. In case of certain states, such as Kerala, where A2 plus FL cost of rupees 1888, Maharashtra A2 plus FL cost of rupees 3057, Jharkhand rupees 1629, West Bengal 1849, Tamil Nadu 1589 have a state specific cost of production over A2 plus FL costs, which roughly come to about rupees 1533. 1533. Bonus may be announced to cover the COP. While Chhattisgarh A2 plus FL cost of 1307 announces bonuses, marginal farmers above 50% are involved in paddy cultivation. Now, coming to a question about if the cost of production is more than the MSP, how will it affect the overall rural economy? Our view is that if the cost of production is over the MSP, it may act as a disincentive to production of paddy, may induce some farmers over the long haul to make some kind of a shift, paradigm shift, but this has a lot of political overtones. This is a very politically sensitive area, and so how far it would be practicable, difficult to say. Marginal farmers may still cultivate rice as a sustenance crop, while large farmers may move towards production of crops offering higher gross returns. So, on the same broader side, I will say one size does not fit all, and we have to look at region specific variations, changes in agroclimatic conditions, the position of the water table, the availability of infrastructure, the facilities, and then we come to a judicious mix of policy options.
So, you spoke about market distortions. In the recent past there have been two market distortions. One is COVID, as you said, and that changed supply for all products. In that time, in 2023, the government banned the export of non basmati white rice. so to ensure that there's adequate supply here in India. So that's a move that the government had to do to ensure people here had enough rice to eat. The ban was removed earlier this year. Are you seeing any change in the farmers' income?
No, again, this issue had several implications. When they banned, they tried to, as you rightly said, enhance the availability of rice to the domestic consumers. Also, maybe they felt that if there could have a shortage of rice, it could have lead to an inflationary spiral, particularly food spiral. So that was also a condition. But then some farmers were quite unhappy because they thought that by exporting rice, particularly at that point of time, the international rice prices were ruling at a much higher level. So they would have. If I were to use a more colorful expression, American kind of an expression, they would have made a killing. But then they say that you are not allowing the free play of market forces. But then again, if I have to use an English phrase, you cannot eat your cake and have it too. On one side, you say MSP, which is a clearly distortionary impact, which tampers with the untrammeled forces of demand and supply when there is some serious issue of shoring up the production of rice in India because of so many compulsions. So then, if export of rice are prohibited, then farmers do not like it. But then it is sometimes necessary to take a nationwide perspective and then consider things impassionately and objectively.
Sir, as you noted, if we remove all of the restrictions that we have on rice, if the price of rice is totally based by what is in the market, if it's totally market determined, the farmers will benefit for sure. But food inflation will take a huge hit. It will grow by miles. In your report, you noted the inflation for rice has increased over the last 5 years. Can you give us some data on that?
Well, sir, I will share you a table. I don't know whether we have given that in when we have looked at inflation from August, price increase from August 2020 to August 24. That means a period of 5 years. And we have looked at, I am not sure whether we have included that in that report. Otherwise, if you wish, I will share that table with you. But what we have done is we have looked at jowar, wheat, bajra products, maize, and other products. And what we find is that inflation, obviously, there are six measures of inflation in the country, but the two measures most which come across most often for discussion are obviously what is called the WPI and the CPI, wholesale price index, and the consumer price index, also popularly called CPI is also popularly called as the retail inflation. And this is the proper benchmark. Even the RBI looks into the trajectory of the retail inflation while formulating its monetary policy assessment. So here what you find is that inflation in rice has largely been in line with inflation of other products. But however, we find large inflation. For example, in arhar, tur, gram, and bajra products, which are something like 82%, 35%, 30% on all this. So the higher prices lead to increased consumer spending on food items and therefore severely constrain the household budget, inducing them in certain cases to shift from these essential items. So I don't know. Otherwise, if you want, I will share this data with you. This is in a tabular form because we are looking at 5 year period from on a monthly basis from August 2020 to August 24. And in some case, gram products have in last 5 years seen a rise of 32 over 33%. Urad has seen a rise of 29%. As I said, arhar and tur, there's been some kind of fire. These prices have been on fire. They have risen by 82.61%. Maize and maize products, 29%. Bajra products, 32%. Wheat has risen by 30%. jowar by 26%. So when you look at in conjunction with the prices of other commodities, you'll find that the increase in rice is quite understandable, and but they have risen, certainly risen. It's necessary also because farmers also need to do well, especially in the light of inflation. So, by and large, in line with the inflationary pressures, in line with the rise in cost of living, there has been a significant increase. But then, obviously, they have not hit the roof as in case of some other commodities.
So, sir, before I let you go, I just wanted to ask your opinion on the overall rural economy, if that's fine. So, in the rural economy, so in the urban economy, we can see that consumption is slowing down, and therefore FMCG players and other players are looking towards the rural markets to fire their cylinders and to keep their profits level going. Given that rural economy itself has a lot of issues and troubles, is this an achievable path for the uh, FMCGs and other players?
Yes, certainly. Rural incomes, obviously, as you rightly highlighted, consumption, particularly in urban conglomerates, in urban agglomerations, urban regions, this has taken a hit because of high inflation, because incomes are not growing to the extent that they were considered desirable. So this year we expect a good farm crop, and then the new crop which is likely to come. So farmers' income, other bigger farmers likely to get a significant boost to their income. So agriculture all over the world has a significant forward and backward linkages. They have significant multiplier effects. So it will boost the FMCG industry in a significant manner. But going forward, consumption, investment, government expenditure, and exports. Now, we have an identity in economics which says that C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Consumption plus investment plus government expenditure plus exports minus imports. So all those four levers of growth and structural transformation need to be focused on to significantly drive the Indian economy forward to be able to meet the challenges of today and the expectations of tomorrow.
So it's safe to say that the rural economy will help boost India's economy for the
Yeah, yeah. Well, we do expect
future.
that, certainly.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today.
No, you're welcome. My pleasure.
In Focus will be back soon with analysis of the biggest news issues. In the meantime, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other platforms. Just search for In Focus by The Hindu. We'll see you soon.